Our theme for 2013 is, who are you called to be? What are you called to be? What is seeking to emerge through you in 2013? What is seeking to emerge through us as a community? What is seeking to emerge through our nation and through every single one of us as a steward of planet Earth? We began this series the second Sunday of January, where we focused on the white stone ceremony and the intention that we have for the year. And what the intention does is it sort of gives us a backdrop for the rest of the year, so as we are engaged in life and details, we can stop and go, okay, so how does the intention that I have put forth for 2013, how does that match? And so I was listening to different intentions that we have put forth, and some have written words like magic, so where would you find the magic in everyday life? And another person put fortitude. Okay, where's the fortitude? And flow and love and compassion. So we kind of always hold whatever that word or intention is for us. And if you haven't got your word, I think it's important to stop for a moment and perhaps look at the YouTube from the white stone ceremony and take yourself through the process of asking yourself, what is it? What is that quality that is seeking to emerge through me this year? Last week, we talked about the different ways that we are called. And for some, we are called to awaken, a call to adventure, a call to spirit. We're called quietly. Like Samuel. In the middle of the night, he heard God calling him, Samuel, Samuel. And it was a very gentle calling. He didn't even recognize it at first. And it's the same way that Martin Luther King was called to ministry. He said in his writings that he was not hit by a bolt of lightning. It didn't come as some great thing of, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to do. But he said it was kind of a gradual revealing that he was to be in the ministry, because he was looking at being a lawyer or a doctor, and the path began to unfold quietly in front of him. For some, the call comes loudly, like Moses when he was confronted with the burning bush, when God spoke to him through the burning bush, or Gandhi when he was thrown from the train in South Africa. There's these boom experiences that we have that we awaken and go, oh, I think I'm supposed to be on this path, on this road. And then some of us, the call goes directly to voicemail. And we don't hear it. And that's called refusing the call. And the truth is that no matter where we're being called to, it is part of the journey to refuse the call. If we look at literature and we look at the Bible and all religious teachings, if we look at movies, what do we see? But the hero's journey, there's always the first step. One of the first steps is the refusal of the call. And I think one of the biggest ones that's out right now is The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So whether you've seen the movie or read the book, you know that particularly in the movie, the first 20 minutes is Bilbo Baggins saying no to his call to adventure. He is very comfortable in the Shire. He's got this amazing house. He's got a pantry that's loaded with food and great cheeses, and he's sitting in his comfortable chair and he's smoking his pipe, and he's just very settled, and you can tell he's been very settled for a very long time. And then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and it's Gandalf, this amazing wizard who's ancient and tall, and he calls Bilbo to adventure. He's like, come on, come with us. And he's like, no adventure required here, no. And he's like, come on, no. Okay, so he goes back to his house and he's comfortable. He's like, thank God. And then the dwarves all show up. His house is like overrun with these dwarves, and they're slobs, and they eat all his food in the pantry, and they snore, and they just mess up his beautiful environment that he's created, and it's total chaos. And they keep saying to him, come on, go on this adventure with us. And he's like, no, I'm staying here. And they're going, you must come, no. And this goes on, like I said, for 20 minutes at least. And then one day he wakes up, and the dwarves are gone. And the house is quiet. It's a mess, but it's quiet. And Gandalf appears at this point again, and he's like, you need to come on the adventure. And he said, how did the dwarves even know where I was? And he said, I put a mark on your door. He didn't see the mark on the door. That's how they knew where to come. So when he wakes up and the dwarves are gone and the house is quiet, and he goes back to his chair, and all of a sudden he realizes he wants to be on this adventure. And he takes off running, and then there's the rest of the story of moving to that. So he refuses the call. We all have an inner Bilbo Baggins, and it's that part of us that wants to cling to our old identity. It's the part of us that doesn't want to change. It's the part of us that's comfortable, it's secure, we got our routine, we've got our pantry loaded with food, we got our little pipe, and we're in our comfortable chair, and we're really happy. And even if Gandalf himself were to come to us and say, come on, I'm calling you on this journey, this wise being appears to us, we're like, nah, I don't think so, there's no adventure here. Even though our door may be marked so that we're found, there's still the refusal of the call as it goes into voicemail. Another one who was called is Jonah. Now, he's a little bit different from Bilbo Baggins, where Bilbo just wanted things to remain the same and he didn't want anything upset, but Jonah is called by God. And he says, I need you to save the people of Nineveh. And you think being called to adventure, you'd go, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, I'm going to do this. And what Jonah does is he runs in the opposite direction. So God is calling him to Nineveh, and he not only doesn't go, he not only just says no, but he runs away. And he finds a boat so that he can head even farther. Well, an interesting thing happens is because you can run away, but you can't hide. You can run from God, but you can't hide. You can run from your destiny, but you can't hide. As he's on the ship, the seas become stormy, and the ship is in jeopardy. And the sailors begin talking amongst themselves, and they say, there's someone on this ship that's not right. And so Jonah confesses, and he says, it's me. I ran from God. And so they did what anybody would do. They threw him overboard. And we're going to pick up the story next week about what happens next. But, metaphysically, the stormy seas can represent our emotions. That when we're not following our path and we're not expressing who we are, when we're not living fully in integrity, there's this storm. And I would even venture to say that the refusal of the call over and over again can lead to suffering, can lead to turmoil. So we all have the inner Jonah. And how do we run? We run from spirit, we run from our calling by distracting ourselves. And in our culture, we have a million ways to do that. We can do it through working too much, or taking care of everybody else, or alcohol and drugs, or television or computer games, you name it. We can do it. We can be Jonah, where we run from spirit. And then the turmoil begins. And then the third one who ran, that I'm going to talk about, is Moses. Now, Moses, again, was approached by God through a burning bush, and he was called to lead the Israelites out of bondage and in Egypt. Again, you would think, wow, I'm being called. This is quite magical. I'm going to say yes and go. And instead, what Moses says in the book of Exodus 4, he says, pardon your servants, Lord, but I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am very slow of speech and tongue. In other words, he wasn't a very good public speaker. Supposedly, he stuttered. And he's thinking, how is it that I'm supposed to go before all these people and the Pharaoh and everybody and say, hey, I'm going to lead you out of Israel. And he goes on to say, pardon your servant, Lord. Please find somebody else. You ever said that? You ever thought that? Please, go find somebody else. And I think that Moses represents that part of us that makes excuses, that seeks to be let off the hook and to come up with all the reasons why. When you think about it, Moses was perfect for the role that he had because he grew up in the household of the Pharaoh. He was a Jew, so he was connected to the Israelites. He was perfect. And, of course, his destiny knew that, but he couldn't see it. Some of our excuses, and this is from Michael Mervash. He said, you may feel like you missed your time. It's too late. I missed the window of opportunity. It's closed. You may feel too old, too uneducated, too broken, too poor, too much failure, you name it. And when we move into that place, we become like Moses, just making excuses so we don't have to follow the call. And the truth is, we all have that experience, particularly when we're being called to a new venture and we're called to expand ourselves. I saw an interview this morning with Stella McCartney, who has a line of clothing, and she was being interviewed, and she said, when I first started in this, I felt like I was too fat. I felt like I was too uncool. I felt like I didn't have any idea what I was doing. And it didn't stop her because she was very clear about her purpose. And she said, my purpose is to provide elegant, comfortable, luxurious clothes that make women feel better about themselves. She says, that's what I'm here to do. That's my work. I'm not here to create stuff that feels uncomfortable because people have enough stuff that they're dealing with, and I'm here to help and to serve in that way. Which is, so rather than let it, but do you see how I'm not cool enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not whatever, can stop us, and we become then like Moses. Now, an interesting thing about Moses is that, yes, he led the Israelites out of Egypt. Egypt represents our sense consciousness when we get lost in our senses. Israelites represent our spiritual consciousness. He led them out of Egypt, but where did they end up? They didn't end up in the promised land right away. They wandered in the desert for 40 years. And Moses never got there. He died before they got to the promised land. He didn't get there. Now, Joshua, his protege, ended up leading the people of Israel into the promised land, but it took 40 years. And why did it take 40 years? Because the calling wasn't ready yet. Joshua represents a change in consciousness and a change in, a willingness to release the old identity, to step into the new. And the other thing is about 40 years, metaphysically, it represents as long as it takes. 40 years represents the building of the structure, and sometimes we get the call, but we don't have the structure around us yet. Maybe we don't have the people to support us, or maybe we don't have the education, or it's not quite the right time. And in 40 years, it took a generation died off. So the generation that left was unable to enter the promised land. That generation had to die so that the next generation could step into the promised land. Again, it's about making this change and releasing and letting go so that we can answer that call. Joseph Campbell said that in our culture, we have both the freedom and the obligation of finding out what our destiny is. And I think, being a Westerner, that we do have this incredible gift and this incredible privilege to pursue our destiny, and in some ways it can become daunting for us. I remember, again, when I was traveling, in Africa, I would notice that people in some villages would never, ever get out of the village. They were lucky if they were able to travel 20 miles from it. And it was almost as if their destiny was defined within that one place. And me as an American, who was not wealthy, but just, had a little bit of money, was able to just jump from place to place, from culture to culture, and have this wide experience of life. And yet it was difficult because I thought, oh my gosh, the choices that are available to us are sometimes too much. They're sometimes astounding. And yet, as Joseph Campbell said, we have both the freedom and the obligation of finding out what our destiny is. So when our call goes into call waiting, or we become like Moses or Jonah or Bilbo Baggins, it's because we are being asked to step into the unknown. And there's not much more scarier to us than the unknown. Again, Michael Mervish says, we wade through fears, confusion, doubt, despair, ambiguity, trepidation, numbness, failure, fogginess, anxiety, low energy, and then more of the same. There are many different necessary and negative facets that can stem from a common denomination, and that is not knowing. And next week, as we move into this process even more, we're going to talk about the waiting process. But I want to start with it. So on a men's retreat that Michael Mervash was leading, one of the men who was on the retreat said that what he was there to do that week was to learn to be patient. He wanted to learn to be patient. And so he was going to go off into the wilderness and just stand there by himself all day. Just stand there. Okay. So it was very hot, so he took an umbrella. And because he was going to be waiting, he brought his briefcase with little knives in it so he could whittle wood, give him something to do. So he's got his Hawaiian shirt on, and he goes off into the hills, and he's gone pretty much all day. And so Michael was taking a walk along the path, and he says he's walking along the path, and all of a sudden in this clearing, and it's really hot outside, there's a middle-aged man standing in the middle of all these wildflowers. And he's standing there in a Hawaiian shirt with shorts, no shoes, and his feet have kind of, fallen into the dirt because he's obviously been standing there for a while. And he has an umbrella, and he has a briefcase by his side. And he's simply standing there, and it was such an odd sight in the middle of nowhere to see this. And so Michael started laughing, and he says, you look like you're waiting for a bus. And he said, I'm not waiting for a bus. I'm waiting for the road. Are we not waiting for the road to reveal itself to us? And sometimes it takes the 40 years, the structure, for the destiny to fully be revealed. And I know that we find it. I mean, in my case, I find it, I lose it, I find it, I lose it. And I think that's the process that we all go through, because we haven't gotten this far in our lives. We're not this awake to have never found it. We find it, and then we can lose it again. So the process then is one of waiting, of running, and refusing. Michael asks us this question. He said, when you ask yourself, have you found that thing that brings you utterly alive on the inside? And you may say no. But then he asks again, have you found that thing that brings you utterly alive on the inside? Not yet. So there's a difference between no and not yet. Because not yet allows itself to reveal itself to us. When we say no, we're being very clear. And we also sometimes think, well, it should be revealed to me very clearly, like the road just showing up. And the truth is, it's part of the mystery. It's part of the mystery in the awakening. So I'm calling the musicians up forward, because they're helping me in this week to answer the call. If your call has gone into voicemail, then I invite you to pick it up and know that within each one of us is an inner Moses, an inner Jonah, an inner Bilbo Baggins. Because if not you who answers the call, then who? And if not here, then where? And if not now, then when?